My name is Joshua Fox Brown. I live in High Point, North Carolina, and I was born and raised in North Carolina. I decided to run for city council because it's the best way to actually achieve the things I'm trying to work on. I could ask people who are currently in government to do these things. They might listen, they might act on some of it, but ultimately the best way to achieve those goals, the best way to actually do some good, is to be the person who actually has that power, has the vote, who actually has a seat at the table in the most literal sense. That way I can work on things like the wages for city employees, raising that to a living wage, expanding the bus system, making sure everyone can actually use that bus to get around to work, and work on reducing violence in the ways that we have power over this city. We do a lot to respond to violence, but I'd like to do a lot more to prevent it. We cannot turn around a bullet once it's fired, but we could do a lot to keep that trigger from being pulled. And I believe that involves working on our mental health treatment, the availability of enough drug treatment, and living wage jobs. Between all of that, I believe we can actually reduce the violence in High Point. I appreciate the efforts I've seen to work with some local nonprofits that are trying to address drug treatment in a comprehensive way. For example, Caring Services, Inc. Groups like that work on more than just drug treatment, but also worry about making sure they eat well, making sure they have housing, getting them help with transportation, getting ready to take on a regular job, and really work themselves back up to being a productive citizen again, are exactly what we need more of. So I'm glad that the City Council has recognized the efforts of groups like that, and I hope they continue to work with them any way we can as a partner, because there are things like that we can't do ourselves as City Council, but we need to work on. One of the things that I disagree with that the City Council has done in the past few years was to pass a law restricting protests. This law was passed around the time that high schoolers had been walking out of their classes in protest of the shooting that happened at Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. And this new law says that any group of 15 or more people that protests in public could be subject to an arrest. Right now, if a group of people goes out and talks about politics near the road, according to this law, that could be defined as a protest. There are people telling me that they won't misuse this law to interfere with free speech, but the fact that a law exists that could be misused is a concern for me. Even if the current administration won't do bad things with it, we should never allow a law to be on the books that could be used to interfere with free speech and the right to protest peacefully. So I would prefer that we strike that law. Another issue we face in High Point is that if you try to put solar panels on your house, you'll find that although you're technically allowed to try and do that, you would have to sell all the power you generate at a wholesale rate into the system and then buy back all the electricity you use, even if you generate it yourself, at a retail rate. And what this effectively means is that no one in their right mind would put solar panels on their house or business in High Point. And that may stem from a combination of some state rules, some contracts we have to buy our electricity, since our city does own its own electric company. But whatever is getting in the way of that is something we need to work on removing as a roadblock from switching over to more solar power, both for the sake of the environment and so that we're not spending over $100 million a year from our city budget to buy electricity from outside of High Point. The more of it we generate locally, the more of those dollars stay here. The High Point furniture market is a massive boon for the local economy. There are a lot of people that depend on that for income a couple times a year that sustains them through the whole year. There are people that take a vacation and rent their house out. There's people who work temporary jobs during that time that pay better than their normal jobs. There's a lot more people offering rides through Lyft and Uber. There's just so many ways it benefits the local economy that, of course, we have to take care of that. The only complaint I really hear from folks locally is that they're a little bit jealous of the transportation system they see those folks have. We wish we all had such a good transportation system the rest of the year. You can park and ride a bunch of different buses through the whole city. It's actually a very nice transportation system for 2 weeks, twice a year. The rest of the time, we just have the city bus as it currently runs, and it doesn't do nearly as good of a job. So we're a little jealous of that sometimes. It's something for us to work on. But at the same time, of course, we're really happy for the furniture market itself. I hope it never leaves. We definitely need the jobs and the income and the business that it brings here. I was one of 2 voter plaintiffs to go to Raleigh and argue in front of the 3-judge panel about the gerrymandered state house and state senate districts. We did just recently win that case. We're working through the maps that have been redrawn by the legislature, which may still be gerrymandered. So I'm actually hoping for the court to step in and choose a special master to give us fair maps for once. Citizens United needs to be overturned. Free speech is one thing. Saying that corporations get to spend unlimited amounts of money as free speech is not what I believe the Founding Fathers intended, and it has a very corrupting influence on politics. You will start to see politicians adjust what their policies are based on who offers the biggest donations. So on September 11th this year, while many of our legislators were out at various memorial events, or in some cases working on some of the redistricting committees, the Republicans seem to have realized that there were not many Democrats in the room because they didn't know they needed to be there that morning, and called a vote at the one time they knew that they could pass that vote without the Democrats present. It was a dirty trick in my book. It was very unethical. They may argue that they can technically do this, but it truly poisons politics in the future because civility between the parties is necessary. We do need them to work together sometimes. If they're getting to the point they're in an all-out war with each other, it will not serve the best interests of the people. It will be much harder to govern and much harder to actually accomplish anything in government. It pushes us towards gridlock in government. When you need at least a majority and sometimes 2/3 to pass something, and you create such division between these parties that you will have a very hard time reaching the majority or 2/3 we need to pass a law, pass a budget, do any of the work we're supposed to do in government. So I think it's a very unfortunate decision. It may have been effective in that technical sense, but it's going too far to use the extremes of their power to enact legislation, knowing that they didn't have a voice from about half the state. And to do so on such a holiday is just particularly grating. I cannot imagine what people who lost a family member in 9/11 would think about using that holiday to win something politically. It's a cheap shot. They shouldn't have done it. High Point, North Carolina might be the only city in America that stretches across 4 counties. This means we are part of 4 different county school systems. We have 4 different sheriffs. We have at least 4 state senators and at least 4 state house reps. Although we aren't necessarily as well represented as you would think to have so many people claiming to represent us in Raleigh. What this really means is that they are using our population to maintain a district so that they can exist in Raleigh. Without doing the work of really representing our people, they don't tend to come around and talk to us during election season. We only see about 1 or 2 of them. So it makes our city very unique, and it does present some interesting challenges when it comes to discussions over school systems, criminal justice, etc. To make sure your vote counts, and especially because if there's anything you need to update about your voter registration, this is your last chance to do it. You can't do it by mail. You need to come in person to the early voting site between now and October 4th. And that way you can update your registration, especially if you've been marked as inactive because you haven't voted in a couple of years. So you can reactivate your voter registration and make sure you're on the rolls to count as a voter. If you come October 8th, it might be too late to update your registration, or fix something that's wrong with it. So please come between now and October 4th to make sure your vote counts.